let me get your thoughts. Do you share in the optimism of investors going into the banking sector right now?
Well, what has happened is, as you know, AMCON has laid out a plan, and people are anticipating that share prices would rise. So I think a bit of that would happen. If you look at the rescued banks, they've been up. I think today the only one of the rescued banks did not move. That was flat. So I suspect that you will see the rally for a while. But I would say people should be cautious, because until you know who is actually buying those banks, until you have an idea of the dilution effect on the number of shares, then you need to be careful, because those prices could actually come plunging down. Yeah.
But I think this rally is one rally that one really has to keep an eye on, because the good thing about the AMCON's intervention is that they have come out to say they would not be selling assets for at least 2 years, and that gives some level of comfort that we will not be seeing that share overhang, which we've seen most of this year.
Yeah, well, that's true, but don't forget that a lot of people buying the rescued banks have to pump money into those banks, and depending on how the money comes, either equity or preference shares, it could have a bearing on the supply of those shares. So there could still be a dilution effect. But what AMCON has said 2 years is good, because you know that that supply is out of the market, and common sense is if there's no supply and there's demand, then prices should go up. But all I'm just saying is, let's just be careful, that's all.
Indeed. Let's talk asset allocation now. Equities, bonds, cash. Looking at everything that's happened, particularly with AMCON, how are you allocating now? What would you advise?
Cash is still king, but I'll wait more with equities than I've done in the last 2-3 years. I believe that, it's time to engage with equities again. Cash, well, yeah, I still have some money in cash, basically placements with banks and so on, because I suspect that rates are going to go up, so I'll go short. Bonds, one has to be extremely careful, but I expect bond yields to continue to rise, which means prices will come down. So maybe a bit of caution on bonds too. Yeah.
And since you are willing to overweight equities, how do you allocate sectorally now? Where do you think there is the most upside?
I like the banks. Basically, I am a fundamental investor, so I like the banks. Some of the banks are good. I think there's good value if you get them at the right price, and the time to get them is now. Cement, maybe outside Dangote Cement, WAPCO, you want to look at that. Oil marketing, I like Mobil, I like Oando, I like Total. Food and beverages, if you want to look at flour mills, Dangote flour perhaps. Nestle, almighty Nestle, 400 now. I don't know if there's an upside on that, but so food and beverage company. Food and beverage, then maybe breweries too. So yeah.
What about insurance? We know that those have been massively depressed. They would be one of the assets that I think AMCON will be holding as well.
Clearly. Insurance, yeah. I think I would expose any portfolio to some insurance stocks. If I had to mention any names, I would take a close look at Custodian and Allied, take a close look at Prestige, take a close look at Aico, and perhaps Continental Re. It's not really insurance, reinsurance, but and see how things go. The prices are really basement, bargain. So.
Okay, let's look at the outlook for Nigeria and the economy, because going into 2011, I think there is some optimism that the market is going to rebound significantly. But what are the key risks for you?
For me, it's political. I mean, we're just talking about that off air, that if we get the politics right next year in terms of having a free and fair election, and we have little trouble with it, then I think you're going to see an economy that is going to be on the upswing, and the stock market will be part of that. So for me, the major risk is political. Of course, then you have issues with if the Niger Delta starts to boil over again, that could affect oil prices and so on. But so far, I mean, the Niger Delta has calmed down relatively. I mean, yesterday we had 1 or 2 stories coming out of the Niger Delta, but relatively speaking, it's a lot calmer. Yeah. So
you're optimistic, obviously.
Extremely optimistic.